Welcome to the What's Up Alec podcast. We fashion ourselves cinematic judge and jury. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host Mattson
Better red than dead.
and Alec Burgess.
Yeah, let's get it.
We appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and hit that follow, subscribe, like, bell notification button. All those buttons that help you keep up with our episodes live, recorded, all of them. YouTube, all that fun stuff. Wherever you can listen to us. Tell a friend about us too. Help us grow the podcast. We appreciate it. We can always use it, and we'll take it from wherever we can get it. We are here today to talk about the Netflix original You People. It was released January 27th, 2023. It was written by Jonah Hill and Kenya Barris. It was directed by Kenya Barris. It stars Jonah Hill, Lauren London, Eddie Murphy, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Sam J, Nia Long, David Duchovny, Travis Bennett, and Molly Gordon. It follows a new couple and their families who find themselves examining modern love and family dynamics amidst clashing cultures, societal expectations, and generational differences. It's pretty new, so if you haven't seen this movie and you want to avoid spoilers, now's the time to pause the podcast. Go watch the movie on Netflix or at home, wherever you watch your Netflix movies, and then come back and pick up where you left off after that. If you're okay with spoilers, hang out with us because we're going to spoil the shit out of this thing. Guys, I kind of like this movie. I'm not going to lie.
Is this really an original movie, though?
Well, no.
I mean, I feel like it's just Guess Who 2023 version, and I like Bernie Mac more than I like Eddie Murphy.
That's because Bernie Mac is much more likable than Eddie Murphy. And Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Yeah.
Remake, you know what I mean? So it's not like, yes, we've seen this film before. I will say that the one major difference between this is this one doesn't make jokes direct, in my opinion. It does make a lot of jokes, and it leans into the awkwardness, right? Like the uncomfortable conversations and the awkward nature of not only like meeting your significant other, future wife, future husband's parents, and that whole dynamic, but then you add in the fact that it's a multiracial relationship, and there's just this obvious cultural difference that you have to deal with. So it adds that, and they play off of that awkwardness a lot, especially with Jonah Hill. The guy's all over the place, and then of course Julia Louis-Dreyfus, her awkwardness. It's uncomfortably funny, but it's funny. But I will say that the one thing that like Guess Who did was it made like active jokes, and they were funny. Don't get me wrong, I love that movie. It's hilarious. Like Bernie Mac is one of my favorite. I rest in peace because I wish the dude was still around because he was hilarious. But I think this one did a little bit more to tackle like the serious aspect of it throughout the movie and like the actual difficulties where you don't start to see the true difficulties in a movie like Guess Who until later in the movie. And it's like a 5-minute climax section where they're fighting in front of the most ridiculous selection of hungover women. You know what I mean? Like it's just like that's like the climax. Whereas this one, like you start to see some serious questioning to the point that, and you don't have this relationship like in Guess Who, it breaks up and they're back together the next day or later that day. You know what I mean? The next day. This one, it's 3 months later, and there's some discomfort and some serious thought going into it, and you see the change in Jonah Hill's character, both good and bad, because of this process that they went through, right? So I think that it tackled the actual issues, or some of the, I don't want to say all the issues because that's never possible in a movie, but at least some of the issues in a more serious way. To me, that's the big difference. If I'm looking to laugh my ass off and not be quite as uncomfortable doing it, I'm going to go watch Guess Who. But I liked this movie because of the fact that it didn't shy away from, and it didn't do it in a ridiculous way, right? Like it was in ways that I'm like, oh, I've put my foot in my mouth in that very same way or similarly in the past. So but I like this movie way more than I thought I was going to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Don't you
It
tell
surprised me.
Alec.
Huh?
I want to hear more from you.
Well, I don't know, because I guess the whole concept is a bit weird to me. The whole kind of caring about what your significant other's parents think of you. Like, I've never cared. And I've made it very clear, like in relationships, like even with Oshi, like the first time I met her grandma's so funny. She passed away, rest in peace. But like, we're sitting in the room and her 92-year-old grandma like looks up at Oshi and says, really, really loud, "Is he native?" And she's like, "No, he's white." "Why did you bring home a white boy?" Right? So I'm cracking up, but it's never really concerned me, because you have this kind of awkward dynamic and you know it's going to be weird. Families are always weird.
Sure.
So I've always made it kind of clear, like, I'm here for you. You know, like, you don't have to be embarrassed what your parents are going to say about me. I don't care. I'm not dating or, marrying your parents. If it bugs you that much the way they act, we won't see them. Like, if you get bugged by my family, you won't see them either. It's perfect.
That's the
So-
sociopath in you. No.
That's a sociopathy. I mean, like, if people have a problem with me, we don't have to go hang out with them. That's fine.
Sure.
So I've never understood like the whole needing to please someone or get their approval, aside from the person that you're actually interacting with. And screw whatever their parents think of you or what your parents think of them. Like, I never understood it. So to me, listening to this, I was going, it's stupid. Like, why are you letting somebody else ruin your marriage or your dating life with someone that you have a connection with, that you enjoy? And I was just like, do people really care that much about getting the approval of others that aren't directly related to the relationship?
So I love that you're saying this too, because this is a generational thing. And I love that they bring that up in like the layout of like the synopsis of this film, that it wasn't just, obviously there are racial concerns that's at the forefront of this film, but there's also generational differences. And what you're talking about is your baby generation, your under 30 generation.
Yeah.
And this generation, what they're portraying here is close, right? 35, similar, just on the cusp of the same generation. But I'll tell you right now, I'm an older millennial. Like, it doesn't get much older in the millennial generation than I am. And that was a big deal. Like, I was terrified. I don't want to say terrified, but I was very nervous every time I met a girlfriend or a partner's parents, because the older generations, we did care. And even older generations than me cared even more. Like, my dad I've listened to my mom and dad tell stories like of my dad asking permission from her dad to marry her. Like, very few, even in my generation, still do that to a degree. So it's like, but that was a big deal back then. And like, I even pondered, do I need to do that? Right. And if Casey hadn't said to me, no, you don't, like, I would have, because that's how I was raised. So there's a big, stark generational difference. And you can see it in this movie where Eddie Murphy's character, Akbar, was like, at the same time, he was like, this is weird, because he was having a struggle with the fact that his daughter's bringing home a white dude, and then they're sitting in Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles. What the hell? And then, but at the same time, like, they knew what the hell they were there for. Like, there's no way that the parents didn't know, because that's what their generation did, and there was no other reason for him to take them to lunch. So I get it, but that's a you generation thing. Like, I'm telling you, that younger generation, very young millennials and the older Gen Z, they don't, and this is wild generalization, right? Not every individual is this way, but a lot of that younger generation in general cares a lot less about that approval, because they were, and I could go, look, I train on generational differences for work all the time. And so I could go very in depth for this, but the big piece of it is the younger generations, life's too short. There's so many things going on that can, quote unquote, unalive them, that they worry less and less about other people's influence and what they think, because they live day to day, because they realize that they may not be here tomorrow. Right. Because that's just the nature of how they grew up. So when I speak about it generationally, I try to keep people out of a box. That was one of my favorite lines in this movie was the whole not putting someone in a box thing's a big deal for me. But I do it to say that in general, I don't like stereotypes, but generalizations are typically true. Like statistics are statistics, right? You can't argue with them one way or another, but each individual person is an enigma. They will go against the norm of whatever box you put them in as an individual. And so that's what I liked. The other thing I liked about this movie is it approached this topic from these two individuals grappling with unfortunate stereotypes and generalizations about a number of different, well, both specifically their cultures, the Jewish and the African American culture. So, and especially the Muslim African American culture, which is even different than just the African American that aren't Muslim. So, I liked that where they're like, these are two individuals that are kind of being themselves, but then they're being influenced, which we see a lot by this culture that they're surrounded by and the generalizations and the stereotypes that they have to deal with. And it's, it was an interesting take, but I love to hear that, Alec. It just makes me go, I know a lot.
One thing I'll say, Alec, is if it's someone that is very close to their family, I can see that mattering to the significant other more, that approval, because if you realize your life is going to be involved with these people and they really don't like you, but that person really values their family's opinion, their relationship, and they're close to them, I can see that mattering more. But especially if you're someone that doesn't have a close relationship with your family or parents, then like, who cares? And so I think maybe they were trying to lean into that more, that it certainly didn't seem like Jonah Hill's character cared for his family as much or what their opinion was, but his fiance, I definitely think maybe they leaned into that a little bit more. So that's what I was thinking. Because I can see your side of the fence too, but where it was a little unrealistic for me is to say that you're just clear cut or walking away. Like, they didn't have any scenes about either of them going back to their the mom or the dad and being like, look, like, what gives you being an asshole? Like, for the daughter to say what Jonah Hill's character said to the dad from the daughter, like, that's what you would expect someone to do at that point, be like, why are you being like this? And that never happened. And that's where I was like, well, did they just like skip that for Hollywood's sake so we could have this cool kind of surprise meet and greet ending? Because I would expect something like that to happen in a real relationship.
Yeah, especially if you go all the way to go get married. Like,
yeah, and just be like,
and then just get it annulled the next day.
I
like,
love you,
no
but
fight.
I know we can't be together. And I was like,
this is the problem with short engagements.
Well, and technically they didn't get married. That was
they didn't get married.
That was their
engagement,
their
rehearsal dinner that all that happened at. Okay. And interesting, I feel like I'm going to talk a lot about generations, but that's also a younger generation thing. Just so you know, two things to know about the younger generations is, well, three things. First is adulthood, right? So when I was a kid, 18 was like the cutoff, right? That's what we talked about. I'm 18, I'm an adult. Bullshit. Even my generation, that's not realistic. At 18, I was not an adult. I just wasn't. Okay. Now, emerging adulthood is a real thing. And most kids 26 or younger, if you ask them, are you an adult? No. They say now adulthood, really the maturity level scientifically they're saying is 26-ish. And most kids in their 20s agree with that. And what comes with that is twofold. And that leads me to these other two things. One, relationships are starting to take place later in life because what's important to them is establishing themselves, getting a job, making money, getting an education, finding a career. And they realize that they'll be more successful in a relationship if they have those things established and they are an adult and have matured before they start a serious relationship. To the point that even though we hear all these frightening stories of younger kids being sexually active, the truth of the matter and the science that's starting to show with these younger generation is that are coming into adulthood, meaning 18 to 25, they're actually marrying younger or older, deciding they're not going to have kids until their mid to late 30s or early 40s. And some of them aren't even talking about sexual activity until they're in the 18, 19, 20, 21 range, which is, and all of this is up and coming right in that generation. What that leads to is it's very easy. I don't want to say very, it's much easier in theory based on the individual again, right? But this is a generalization for that generation of the younger individuals to walk away from a relationship like this and say, this is not what I wanted. This is not where I'm at in my life. And so I'm going to step away because this is too difficult. And I'm not to the point that I'm mature enough or willing and able to go through these hardships that they're having to deal with. Because I can't even imagine, like, I have a great relationship with Casey's dad, like, and mom. Like, they're like my second parents, and I love spending time with them. I love hanging. And it's always been that way with them. It's been easy for me to integrate. We've had a great relationship. I can't imagine, like, I watched this movie and I watched Jonah Hill and Eddie Murphy interact, and I'm like, I'd have fucking walked away too. Because that's bullshit. Like, you're sitting at your own bachelor party with a lap full of Coke and I can't freaking sniff it. Fuck you. I'm pissed. You know what I mean? For the sake that I'm trying not to be awkward, because you're going to go tell my wife or my future wife that I was snorting Coke. Fuck off. Don't ruin my bachelor party, dude. I'd be salty.
I would have walked away before then.
Fair.
Like the instant I got taken into a barber shop,
Wearing the wrong
red
colors.
hoodie. Yeah, wearing the wrong colors. Like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care how I feel about you unless you put a stop to this or say something. Like, I'm out. Deuces.
Yeah.
How do we feel about the other side though, with the kind of like the trophy fiance, like the mom fiance interaction? Because I feel like that's got to happen a lot too.
I don't have any feedback into that, so I've never been the trophy fiance. Wish I was.
That side is, it's an interesting dichotomy, because when I think about that side and I was watching that part of the movie, the white side or the Jewish side, right? So I liked that they added in the fact that this was a Jewish family, so they came with their own set of culture quirks and generalizations that went along with that.
Holocaust ring.
Yeah, I was like, oh boy. Though I will not lie, like, I was laughing my ass off when they were having that conversation with his partner, his podcast partner. I was like, that's hilarious, just the way that conversation went. But I think, like, for me, watching that, coming from being a white man in a very white family that has dated women of color in the past, like, I haven't seen the whole here's this someone that's different that's coming into the family, right, to add culture, I haven't seen that piece of it, but I've seen, like, the walking on eggshells side of it, where it's and it's a natural thing, right? Like, we don't, and the lack of understanding, and then you try to act like you understand, or you overdo it trying to learn more about the culture, which in essence, if you're not doing it correctly, learn from her, right? Make her the expert and have those conversations, ask the right questions, as opposed to let's go to Google and figure out, you know what I mean? When she said that, I was like, oh, son of a bitch. Because that's the part. And I think that's, again, one more thing that I liked about this movie is it pinpointed that stop it. Stop trying to understand things that you'll never understand from your own perspective, and Google will never give you a correct answer. It's only going to make things worse. If you have the opportunity, you need to Google some things, but if you have the opportunity to ask someone in the Black community, someone in the Jewish community, someone in the Muslim community, have those conversations and ask those things in a respectful way, do it, because you're going to get the answers more fully and in a better way than you can ever get it from fucking Google, or from, like, that I'll ever get it from people that look like me, right? Like, the one thing that I fully 100% agreed with was near the end of this movie when Jonah Hill's character was on the podcast saying, you're right, I'll never understand it, and we'll never 100% come together, because there's always that difference that's going to be between us. And if we accept that, then we can treat each other as individuals, and we can have conversations and questions, and we can build a relationship with individuals. But I will never understand, nor will any of us on this podcast, and I'll speak for you, I don't do that often, but we'll never understand what it's like to be Black, Hispanic, Muslim, Jewish. We just won't. Not fully. We can have conversations that'll help us understand a little better from their perspective, but never from our own.
Speak for yourself. It's about time I converted to Judaism.
There you go. There you go. Oh, goodness.
No, that's a good point. But like for me anyway, like during that part, like the thing that I guess kind of frustrates me is that it's almost saying that, you know, since there's no way to understand it, leave it at that. Don't bother trying. Almost
Sure.
is what kind of like it hit me with, and I was like sitting there going, like, if you keep saying that there's boundaries and walls there, right, they're never gonna get busted down or even looked at. People are just gonna say there's a wall, I'll never understand it. I'm gonna move on to something else. That's easier to achieve, that's easier to contact to, instead of having that difficult question or asking stuff out. They'll just go to Google because Google is easier to find, and things like that. Versus if they had shown kind of the breaking down instead of just saying that, oh yeah, it'll never be the same type thing. Like, you know, we're gonna make it work, but we're the exception rather than the rule.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's just the way I took it, but I was sitting there going like, really? You didn't solve any problem. You just stated that there is one and said, I'm the exception to the rule. But for everybody else out there, you're going to have problems. Don't even bother trying.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, and I think they tried to do it with the weird apology thing from both Akbar and what's his face's mom, but like it was so brief and short. Like, great, they had this emotional growth and this personal growth of understanding that because they got their asses chewed out right before the breakup, right? But and they both had these realizations that they were wrong. But I get your point. That little brief moment doesn't show the value and the lesson there that we need to let go of assumptions and we need to let go of these stereotypes on all fronts and just realize that we're human beings at the end of the day. If you have a question, ask it, have these conversations and get to know each other on a human level, then those problems tend to, while never going away, they tend to lessen and soften as you go. Like, it's just like you see the relationship of the two friends that are on the podcast, Jonah Hill's character and his podcast partner. Like, they can say whatever the hell they want to each other within reason, I'm sure, but because they've built that trust and they've had those conversations, they understand each other well enough. And, you know, it's true for any friendship, whether you're different, culturally different or not, there has to be that level of trust. And that's the part that I think that we miss out on is we try to, and this is human nature. We all have done it and we all will continue to do it on a certain level. We do things from our perspective because it's the only thing we truly know. And we make assumptions based on those perceptions and understanding, when in reality, if you can let go of your assumption, that's the most truest place to me, where the make an ass out of you and me statement of assume is so true, because you're just walking into a nightmare. The only place that I can make an assumption are things that I truly understand and have lived myself. Outside of that, I'm going to walk into a landmine. You know what I mean? It's just going to happen because I don't have any history or experience to build off of, build that assumption from. It's so, yeah, I definitely agree with you that I like what they were doing with the point of it, but they didn't give it quite enough, which I think they could have done, to Mattson's point, if instead of just breaking it off and having a 3 months later card, they show we need to postpone the wedding instead of we're going to break up. And then they have, you know, we have this 3 months of, obviously they're miserable together, though they're trying to make it work because they're trying to bring in the families into the relationship, right? Versus the families understanding this is really none of our fucking business. We've made things harder on purpose or not on purpose, however it was. We need to step in and apologize and then watch the growth come from there. I think that would have been more effective to the point of what they were trying to do.
Well, yeah, Tay said it best. When she watched it with me, and the ending of this, she's like, so it's been 3 months. They see each other for the first time. They talk about him getting these slides that made her think of her. Or the parents have talked, all is well. Everyone's shown up, and they got married that day. She's like, they still haven't resolved necessarily the issues have either of them feel about the other individual's key family member that's been a problem, and they they have to be able to talk about them. So because they had a lot of backhand comments, back and forth things where they fought about but went past it, but those issues were still there. There's still a foundation of like this has to get solved, and it's not going to happen in a 2-minute conversation and we're just going to get married that day. And I know that's Hollywood doing what Hollywood does just to have a happy ending, but it did feel that for me, the biggest disconnect in this movie was the ending. It was just all of a sudden like they had it all figured out into the rehearsal dinner, and it breaking apart right there with that really well scripted dialogue from Jonah Hill about no one asked. That, I mean, phenomenally written. Like that, I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever heard it said better than that. But from that point on, I really think that they just didn't really know how to tie a bow on it very well, and I really think it detracted. We always remember how a movie ends. An average movie can turn into a great movie because of the ending, and to me, this really suffered in the delivery at the end.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the ending was too Hollywood for me, but I get why they did it because nobody likes watching a sad movie that's supposed to feel happy.
It would have been like another 20 minutes, 30
Sure.
minutes, and I appreciate that this movie wasn't overly long, but I'm a stand by it. It was a poor decision at the end.
No, I agree. I think that, and to your point, Mattson, the dialogue and throughout the movie, some of the dialogue was fantastic, right? Like even the conversation between Eddie Murphy's character and his brother in the car up to deciding, like, there's a very interesting conversation, very well written. It was also, and on the flip side, we talked about Jonah Hill going off on Eddie Murphy at the end, which I agree was a completely wonderful way to express that situation. I liked too the other side of that when the fiance, when she went off on mom, and mom, I throughout the movie, you can tell that the mom or Julie Louis-Dreyfus's character, I don't think there were ever, unlike Eddie Murphy's character who was trying to break them up, and albeit for what he saw as correct reasons, right? But he was trying to do that. He was openly trying to break them up. Whereas Julie Louis-Dreyfus just was stupid. And she shows that throughout the movie. She's kind of a dumbass. Even her son's like, she's kind of a moron. I don't think there was ever really nasty intentions there, right? Unlike that. But just because your intentions are good doesn't mean that what you're doing is okay. And that's the part where, like, that conversation to me almost hit more home than the other, because I can relate more to feeling like Jonah Hill in that situation. I'm a white dude that's had things said to me like that, never to that extent, but I can relate to that. What I can't relate to personally is the other side of that, where I know that I've said, well, that was never my intention. Whether that was in talks of racial pieces, I've said it to Casey a million times, I've said it to my friends, my parents, that was never my intention. And the famous saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Just because my intentions are good does not free me of wrongdoing, right? I still did something that offended someone, that wronged someone, that hurt someone's feelings. How do I make amends? And I can't just say, well, my intentions were there. And that's why I love that every time that Julie Louis-Dreyfus's character kept trying to interrupt her, she just wouldn't let her. She's like, look, because she was, in my opinion, in that conversation, she was saying, I know you weren't trying to be a dick, but you're a fucking dick. And I was like, you need to hear that, because you need to understand that all the good intentions in the world doesn't change. The things that you did put her in a terrible position and was very unfair to her. So that to me was the best part of this entire movie, was the writing across the board. So kudos to the guy that wrote it with Jonah Hill and then directed, Kenya Barris, has also does the writing and creating of shows like Blackish and Grownish, which I don't know if you've ever watched any of those.
Not Grownish, but Blackish is funny.
Yeah. So he's, and then Mixedish, and like he's done, and he did do the screenplay for Coming to America 2, which I liked for nostalgia reasons. It wasn't necessarily the greatest.
I remember that how bad that movie was. So.
But Blackish and Grownish are two very hilarious and very well written shows. And I think this one had some fantastic writing to it. And from a selfish perspective, I love the backdrop of a podcast.
I was cracking up. You're going to be a podcaster?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, this is my future. I can already see it.
Yeah, I can relate to this. Hey man, that's goals right there. One day we're recording our show in a studio. Like hell yeah, cameras all around. Shit was cool.
That'd be dope.
I know. Yeah, there's a lot to this movie. I think, and I thought, like I said, I thought it was pretty good for what it was. And
This movie had some funny moments, and we talked about more of the serious stuff. But I will say this movie did make me laugh. One of them that I'm thinking of right now, I used to be a bigger fan of shoes and care about them. I still like them, but when he had to take his shoe off so he didn't get a crease in it when he was proposing to her, that made me laugh. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, there's certainly, you guys can rattle some off too. There's some other things that definitely made me laugh. Gosh. One thing I will say that wasn't believable to me, the whole Uber scene, how he actually met her and doing that, like, no way. Get out of here. That's not happening. Like, I just don't see it.
I see, and I think it's a stretch. Like, I think you have to have the two right individuals. But my cousin Rocky, he could talk to anybody, and he can make people be like. He's one of those guys that used to blow my brain because we go out and we hang out, we go out and play, and he could talk to anyone, and they would fall in love with him instantly. Like, so I think about him in that situation, and I'm like,
but
I could see that happening.
What's Jonah Hill's character's name in this again?
Ezra.
Oh yeah, how would I forget that? Ezra. I mean, it's funny, anyways. He's already proven in this movie that his character is not good at small talk or like just traditional greetings, because he's just saying like, how's the weather? Well, I hope the weather is good for you too, kind of stuff. So I was like, he was just totally suck at that stage in his delivery.
Yeah.
He's not smooth. So
well,
I find it.
Sure, no, I get what you're saying. I think for me, the part that won me over, because I was with you but when he showed her the picture and she's like, shit, we really could be twins. Like, I think that was the moment where she softened up, and it was like he was able to relax a little bit because she wasn't on the defensive or the offensive at that point. It was like, oh shit, this is the weirdest combination of circumstances to end up in a meet cute on the planet. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously it took a lot of weird things happening. I think one of the funniest conversations for me was like early on when he was having a hard time and his podcast partner, and they were having like the Drake conversation, like the different versions of Drake. Like I was but I laughed this whole movie. Like Casey was looking at me like, are you okay? Because I was laughing my ass off. Like there were moments I couldn't breathe because I love a good like back and forth. Like I was dying at the whole, because it makes me so uncomfortable that I just can't help but laugh. Like where they're at dinner and Eddie Murphy's character's like something about, yeah, we don't have a good relationship with boats. And like, the daughter's like, yeah, it's very true, or water. And then the idiot mom steps up. She's like, kind of like Jews with trains, right? And I'm like, oh shit. But from a certain perspective, I was like, that conversation is so uncomfortable. It made me giggle because I was like, this is weird. But I could see stupid shit like that happening in real life, which to me translates to humor. Because I'm like,
there's JJ's sociopathic side making its appearance.
It certainly is, because I'm serious. Like I can imagine that in real life, that conversation going down in that situation, and I go, how do you fucking recover from that, right? Like, and that's the part that makes me laugh. It's like, you're so fucked, and like you said, that's my sociopathic side coming out. But yeah, I love it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of funny parts of this movie throughout all of it. Like the part in the strip club when he's sitting there with Eddie Murphy's character and he's like, do you have a Coke guy? No, I don't have a Coke guy. And all of his buddies, yeah, you have a Coke guy. Yeah, it's the Coke guy. Like that whole conversation, I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard because you knew he was going to show up. He's got Coke guy tattooed on his knuckles. And he just randomly throws a bag of Coke. Like it's like 20 grand worth of Coke right there. It was silly. I liked it. I laughed my ass off. I had a good time watching this movie. Great time, actually. So surprised me. I went into it with very low expectations because I'm not usually a Jonah Hill fan. He's not my favorite in comedy roles, which is ironic. I like him in most of his serious roles, like in Moneyball. I think he's amazing. In The Wolf of Wall Street, he was outrageously good. Most of his comedy shit, I don't
One
enjoy
would
him.
say he was kind of in a comedy role in Wolf on Wall Street, though.
Kind of, but I think it was a more serious movie, even though he tended to be the comic relief.
Serious movie with an unserious real plot line is
Well,
more like
sure.
it.
Fair.
The
Probably
things
more
that-
real than we want to admit, though.
yeah. Yeah, I will say this movie for me, like subject matter, a very polarizing topic, tough thing to talk about, one that I don't feel fully qualified to talk about, just to be completely honest with our listeners, but something that I like that the Ezra's co-host talked about, that I think a lot of times we feel like the differences are just too much that we can't bridge the gap. And I think this movie showed a way of identifying what we don't want to do, being like the dad, for instance, and the mom. But I really resonate more with the dad's reaction about, like, if you've already decided what you've decided, how is anything ever going to change if you're already made up in that way? And the mom's approach was, like you were saying, she kind of tried, but didn't really realize the error of her ways. And so if you're either of those people, I think this movie really showed you got to change your approach and have that self-realization, unless someone's going to be that in your life. And then you have to make the decision, hey, someone told me I'm this, and then I have to actually act upon it. That doesn't really happen these days because we have keyboard warriors on the internet, and it's just so easy to type what you want to say, hide behind that, and then just the world feels like a mean and ugly place. And I feel like they created something that allowed me to have dialogue and to think about that while still being pretty funny. And I do commend them for being able to talk about something that's difficult, also make light of it, and provide an entertaining product. And I think that's hard to do, but they did a better job than I thought.
Do we rate this thing?
Let's do it.
All right. Mattson, you go. No, Alec. We were
I get to go
promised you're
first?
going to go first this time. You go
All
first.
Yeah,
right.
it's a rare moment for Alec to go first.
I'm
Yeah.
excited. I feel like I go first more than you guys think I do, but that's
It's
okay.
possible. I never remember.
I'm to start a tracker.
Do it. So, you people, I didn't really enjoy this movie as much as I thought I would. And I think that might have been going in, I saw Jonah Hill, Eddie Murphy, and I thought, okay, I can get behind this. The comedy really didn't land for me. And it's kind of this weird dichotomy because I texted you, JJ. Like, on the inside, I'm an 85-year-old man, even though we just talked about the generational differences. So a lot of the comedy went right over my head because I didn't understand the lingo. And then I, like process. And 2 minutes later, I was like, oh, that was kind of funny. But it was just late to the party. So, by that time, we moved on to something else. And then I also just didn't understand, like we talked about earlier, didn't understand this whole kind of nature of being concerned about what other people think of you. It's something that I haven't paid much attention to for the majority of my life. I just don't care. If you don't like me, I won't talk to you. Problem solved. Woohoo! We're both happy. So that was a struggle, and like watching these two individuals tear their life apart based on people's opinions or how they treat you outside your relationship. So it was a weird kind of movie to watch because I spent most of it going, well, why are you doing that? That's stupid. Just don't care. Like, there was a point where Jonah Hill's character talks to his girl, and he's like, when'd you become such a devout Muslim? As a way to complain. And I was like, who cares? Like, it's the person you fell in love with. You knew they were Muslim. If they choose to be devout on a certain day or whatever, like, they're still the person that you fell in love with, right? There's a different thing that's going on there. Maybe figure out the root of the problem instead of just trying to, dig in your heels and, oh, when do you care about your religion so much? Because then they're going to come back with, well, you've never been a devout Jew. And now you're fighting over something that nobody wants to fight about. So it was a struggle to get through this. I'm going to say middle of the road, 2.5. I don't think I'll ever really watch it again. Just because Oceana kind of had the same viewpoint as I did, didn't really enjoy it. So we'll watch Guess Who instead. But yeah, 2.5.
Cool. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I went into it with very low expectations again. I'm not a huge Jonah Hill fan. And Eddie Murphy's always been one of my favorites, but he hasn't done much that's been super impressive to me over the last few years. He's done a handful that are funny, but I miss like Beverly Hills Cop Eddie Murphy. You know what I mean? Like that's the Eddie Murphy I'm used to. So I struggle with some of the newer stuff. But I will say I thought that the message of this movie overall was really good, and I thought it was very well written, and I like the way that it portrayed this melding of cultures and when it was successful and how it looked when it was just two human beings that didn't really care about those things, and then the outside influences that really made a difference in this relationship. So I really enjoyed how that was written and how it was portrayed. I will say that I do think that there were some things that were rushed through. I think there were some things that for the sake of time and the Hollywood piece, it was almost written like a very long episode of television, which makes sense given the fact that the writer does television a lot, writer and director. So it did kind of have that feel. So that was one piece that I like, though I did like the pace as well. So it's kind of this weird back and forth on that for me, but I did find it very funny. And I did find, so that balance of real life, as real as Hollywood can get in showing a point and yet balancing it with some really good humor. I think they did a really good job there. And I chuckled a lot during this movie. Still wasn't a perfect movie, and for a lot of reasons, I might go back and watch Guess Who before I'd watch this if I'm not looking. But I would watch this movie again. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. Not the greatest movie I've ever seen, but I enjoyed it, and I would sit through it again because I really, like I said, I think I would laugh constantly, no matter how awkward I got, because I was uncomfortable a little bit during some of it, which I think is good. We need to be uncomfortable in life sometimes. So yeah, there it is for me, 3.5. Mattson, bring it home.
Yeah, I've already kind of give my synopsis the last time I spoke, so I'm not going to belabor everyone with that. I'm going to give this movie a 3. Touch on some difficult and much needed dialogue within this particular topic, and I thought they inserted some comedy into it to alleviate some of that just heavy discussions that happen in this movie. And I thought the writing at parts was pretty exceptional. As I've already said, I just think the movie, the ending there especially, was kind of a letdown, and for that I think it kind of stunted where this movie could go in my rating system. But something I think people should watch to just ask yourself where you fit on that spectrum and what you can do to kind of improve the way that you interact with others. And yeah, I was just a tough topic to talk about, but one that's very necessary, as JJ talked about. So wasn't, I guess, initially didn't really have a lot of thoughts on how good I thought this movie would be. I didn't even know anything. I didn't know anything about this movie until we clicked on it, and just went for the ride.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it. All right, Alec, tell everybody where they can find us, buddy.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to You People. You people listening keep the world turning and keep JJ off the streets, which is just good for society. I'm curious to see what you people thought of this film and if you enjoyed it. Drop us a comment to let us know your thoughts. If you people are fans of the pod and interested in supporting us more directly, you can join us on Patreon, where every dollar earned goes towards scaring Alec straight. No luck so far. He is still an asshole. Special thanks to our patron, Twerking She-Hulk. You, sir, are a sweet Georgia peach and a mustache twirler. Check us out wherever fine podcasts can be found, like Stitcher or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, where you can watch Mattson pick his nose. Short outro today because I got to pee, so I'll send it back to the King of Swing, the great Bambino, JJ.
I love it. Now I feel like I need to drag this shit on because you have to pee. But since I'm a good friend and not quite the asshole that everyone makes me out to be, that's not true at all. I will end this episode on that. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye. Hasta la vista, baby.
Cinemagic out.